Before we start the stories, I'd like to greet you a good day. Feel free to use headphones if you want, and if possible, comment where you're from and what time you're listening to these stories. Now let's begin. This happened back in the summer of 2018, when I was about 19. My Aunt Linda asked me to stay at her house for a weekend while she went to a real estate convention down in Dallas, Texas. She owned a couple rental properties, mostly Airbnb, and she traveled a lot for that kind of work. Her house was in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. It wasn't a mansion or anything, but it was way bigger than what I was used to. 2 floors, 5 bedrooms, and one of those open-floor living rooms with a giant flat-screen TV and surround sound that made you feel like you were sitting in a movie theater. She lived alone after my uncle passed away in 2014. So she wanted someone there just to watch the place and make sure nothing happened. I got there around 3 in the afternoon, unpacked a small bag, and picked one of the guest rooms upstairs to crash in. Everything seemed fine at first. Around 6 p.m., I was just relaxing in the living room, scrolling on my phone with the TV playing in the background, when I heard a knock at the front door. Now, the house had a Ring camera installed, so I didn't even have to open the door. I just checked the app. There was this guy standing there, mid-40s maybe, jeans, a plain button-up shirt. Nothing about him screamed threat, but he didn't look familiar. I answered through the intercom and asked who he was. He said he was a close friend of Linda's. I told him she was out of town. Then he asked who I was, and I said I was her nephew. That's when he started pressing, saying he needed to get inside real quick, that he left something important in the house. That immediately set off alarms in my head. My aunt would have mentioned if somebody was supposed to stop by, and she definitely wouldn't tell me to let some random guy in. I told him I wasn't allowed to let anyone inside, and he just stood there for a second, nodded, and walked off. I thought it was weird, so I called my aunt, but she didn't answer, probably busy at her convention. Eventually, I brushed it off. But a couple hours later, maybe around 8 p.m., there was another knock at the door. This time when I checked the camera, it wasn't just one guy. There were 2 of them, both bigger dudes wearing dark jackets, and one of them had a blue trucker cap pulled low. They were holding pizza boxes. At first I thought maybe they had the wrong house, but then they said, "Your aunt ordered food for you. Come grab it." My stomach dropped because that didn't make sense. My aunt left me money to order whatever I wanted, but she didn't mention anything about delivery. Plus, I hadn't even ordered food myself. I told them I wasn't expecting anything and they had the wrong address, but they kept insisting. "Come on, just open the door, man. It's already paid for." I said no. That's when one of them slowly lifted the lid of the pizza box, and instead of food, I saw the outline of a handgun inside. I froze. I didn't even know what to say. Then the other guy started knocking harder, except this time he was using the gun in his hand, tapping it against the door like he was daring me to open it. What they didn't realize was that the Ring camera was catching everything. I was panicking, trying to call 911, when I suddenly heard another sound, the back door rattling. Someone was messing with it. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, and then I heard the unmistakable noise of the back door being forced open. I called 911 right away, whispering to the dispatcher what was happening. She told me to find somewhere safe to hide and that officers were on the way. I ducked into this little storage closet under the stairs. It was cramped and dark, but I didn't have a choice. From there, I could hear them moving inside the house. Their footsteps were heavy, purposeful, like they weren't just randomly poking around. They knew what they were looking for. One of them opened a cabinet near the TV and muttered something about a ledger. I'll never forget that word. The blue ledger. Check everywhere. That's when it clicked. They weren't here for me. They were after something my aunt had in the house. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. The dispatcher kept me calm, saying officers were just minutes away, but minutes felt like hours. Then I heard it, the sound of sirens. Flashing lights filled the street outside. The men scrambled. I heard them rush out the back door. Then gunshots. The cops yelled, and a whole commotion broke out. I stayed put until an officer finally shouted inside the house, making it clear it was safe. When I stepped out, my legs almost gave out. Turns out they caught one of the men, shot in the leg while trying to run. The other two slipped away into the neighborhood, hopping a fence into a neighbor's yard. When I explained everything, the officers asked if I had any idea what the blue ledger was. I told them no, but that the men mentioned it more than once. Later, when my aunt came back, I told her everything. She acted calm, but when I asked her about that ledger, she brushed it off like it was nothing. Just business stuff, she said. She didn't want to talk about it any further. To this day, she still lives in that house. She got a couple dogs for security, but I can't help but feel like there's more to the story than she lets on. I never stayed there again, and I don't think I ever will. When I was 16, something happened at my house that I'll never forget. And honestly, it's one of the scariest experiences of my life. It was the April of 2009, and my parents had gone to Hawaii for a week-long vacation. That left me and my 3 sisters alone in our house in Eugene, Oregon. The house was in one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods, the kind where everyone knows each other, but behind our street was a long stretch of woods that always felt a little off. The first couple nights alone weren't too bad. We stayed up late watching movies, ordering pizza, just enjoying the fact that Mom and Dad weren't around to tell us to go to bed early. But on the third night, everything changed. At around 1:45 in the morning, I was woken up by the sound of our house alarm blaring. It was one of those deafening alarms that could probably wake up the entire block. My oldest sister, Rachel, burst into my room hysterical. She was bawling, holding her phone, talking to her long-distance boyfriend who lived in Nevada. To this day, I never understood how she thought he could help, but she was terrified. I rushed downstairs to check the back sliding door because that's the one the alarm was telling us had been tampered with. The weird thing was, when I got there, it was still locked. Nothing looked out of place. I figured maybe the wind rattled it. It had a loose frame and had set off false alarms before. So I calmed Rachel down, reset the alarm, and we all tried to go back to sleep. About an hour later, I was half asleep when the alarm went off again. Rachel came running into my room, screaming this time. She shut the alarm off on the keypad, but as soon as she did, we all heard something that froze us in place. The sound of our front screen door slamming shut. I can still hear it clear as day. The creak of the hinges, then the metal frame clanging against the door behind it. My heart was racing. I told Rachel to stay behind me, and I grabbed the biggest knife I could find from the kitchen drawer. It was this heavy butcher knife that honestly felt ridiculous in my hands, but it was the only thing I had. Rachel stayed on the phone with her boyfriend while following me around the house as I tried to check every corner. When I went downstairs into the basement, I pulled back one of the curtains on the small windows that faced the front yard. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a man. He was standing perfectly still, directly in front of our living room bay window. He wasn't moving. He wasn't trying to break in. He was just standing there, facing our house. His posture told me he was looking straight inside, even though I couldn't see his face clearly. I immediately called 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely punch in the numbers. After what felt like forever, I ran back upstairs to see if I could get another look. From the second-story hallway window, I spotted him again. But this time, he was running. He sprinted across our yard into a dark sedan parked in our neighbor's driveway. I had never seen the car before, and I knew none of our neighbors drove anything like it. As the car pulled away, I caught the clearest look I ever got of him. He rolled his window all the way down, slowed to a crawl, and just stared at me. His eyes, there was nothing behind them. It was like he was staring straight through me. A couple minutes later, the police showed up. I told them everything, how I saw him at the window, how he ran to the car, how he stared at me. But they didn't take me seriously. They said the alarm probably malfunctioned, that I was just tired, maybe imagining things. One of them even told me to quit wasting their time. That night stuck with me. We never had another break-in attempt after that, but over the following months, we'd hear things. Random tapping on the windows, doorknobs rattling in the middle of the night, and on one occasion, the the sound of footsteps on our back deck when nobody was outside. To this day, I don't know who that man was, what he wanted, or why he was just standing there watching. But I'll never forget the way he looked at me as he drove away. And sometimes, late at night when I'm half asleep, I swear I can still hear that front door slam shut. This happened when I was about 10 years old, in the summer of 1999. I lived in Arizona, and my best friend Caleb invited me over for my very first sleepover at his place in Flagstaff. I'd been to his house plenty of times before, after school, weekends, you name it, but never actually stayed the night. Caleb's family seemed normal enough, though not perfect. His mom was one of those chain smokers who always sat on the porch with a cigarette in hand, and his dad drank a lot of beer, but they were both friendly. Felt like a typical suburban family. That night was just like any other sleepover you'd expect in the late 90s. We ate junk food, downed cans of Mountain Dew, and stayed up late playing PlayStation 1, specifically Twisted Metal 2, which we were obsessed with at the time. Around 1:30 in the morning, we finally got tired and unrolled our sleeping bags in the living room. Caleb, another buddy of ours, and I all crashed pretty fast. But I woke up maybe an hour later to the sound of glass breaking. It wasn't a small crash, either. It sounded like a cabinet of fine china tipping over. Startled me instantly. I looked at Caleb and our other friend, but neither of them moved a muscle. I whispered, nudged them, even shook Caleb's shoulder, but nothing. They were breathing, but out cold, like they'd been drugged. The noise came from upstairs, so against all common sense, I slowly made my way toward the staircase. The house was pitch dark except for a dim light flickering from the dining room. When I reached the top, I froze. I saw something had toppled over onto the dining table, and Caleb's dad was there. His head and upper body pressed awkwardly against the table like he was stuck or being held down. And right next to him was something I can barely describe. It was tall, darker than the shadows around it, shaped like a person but without a face or features, just standing there looming. I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me until it twisted its head toward me. And then it screamed. It wasn't just loud. It was like the sound shook the entire house. The walls trembled, the floor vibrated, and my chest felt heavy like my lungs were collapsing. I was frozen with terror until I finally screamed out, "Leave me alone!" The moment I did, something invisible slammed into me. Hard. It felt like I was yanked backward, not just falling but being launched through walls, through the floor itself. My vision blurred, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the living room anymore. I was laying somewhere hot, dusty, and strange. It didn't look like Caleb's house at all. The air was heavy, the walls didn't look the same, and the silence around me was suffocating. I searched the house for hours, crying, yelling for Caleb, for his parents, but there was no answer. No one was there. At some point, I started to hear voices, muffled, coming from beneath me. At first, I couldn't make them out, but then I recognized one of them. It was my mom. She was crying, praying out loud for me to come home. When I shouted back, she went silent, so suddenly it scared me even more. Then I heard her screaming for my dad, telling him she heard me. Not long after, people rushed in. I saw hands pulling me out of this cramped, hot space, and that's when I realized where I was. I was in Caleb's attic. Here's the thing though, there was no entrance to the attic from inside the house. The only way in was from a window outside, at least 20 feet off the ground. No ladder, no steps, and I was just a kid. There's no way I could have gotten in there by myself. What makes it worse is what everyone told me afterward. I thought only a single night had passed. But in reality, I had been missing for 4 days. 4 entire days that I have no memory of. Police questioned me, doctors ran tests, psychiatrists interviewed me. No one could explain it. The only evidence was the condition I was in. I was starving. I had 5 long parallel scratches down my back, strange marks on my arms and legs, and one of my eyes was completely bloodshot for a month. To this day, I don't know what happened. Sometimes I wonder if I actually left that house at all, or if a part of me is still there, trapped in that attic.